Hey there, hi there, hello there, Nick here. Please don't do what I'm doing. The following is for entertainment purposes and is not an instructional video. Steps might be left out if too boring or redundant. This is just to document my journey in case modding. Now that the disclaimer is out of the way, this week's video, I'm going to take you along with me while I do some modifications to a computer case. Whoa there, yeah. Hey, future Nick here. Already cutting in. This didn't go as I hoped. I was going to tell you all about how I removed all the components from the case and cut holes and ground the edges so they were not sharp, cleaned up all the metal leftovers before putting it back together. That was all before I started trying to place the fans, before I cut the holes so I could know where I needed to cut the holes. My plan was simple. I was going to place the fans first, then draw lines on the case so I would know where to cut. Since it has this dot pattern, I was just going to connect the dots with a Sharpie. Then I would just cut along the lines I had drawn. I figured then I could place the dust filters over the top of these new holes, and that would filter the air and remove a bunch of the resistance from the metal of the case. These filters attach to the case with magnets. This is the current layout of fans. It has one intake fan and two exhaust fans. However, for the most part, the rest of the air in the case is stagnant and doesn't get cycled out, and the intake isn't filtered. I figured I could add a few more fans and plan to change to this new layout. 3 intake fans, 3 exhaust fans. Most importantly, all intakes were covered by dust filters. And this is important in making it so I don't have to clean this very often. I know that pushing the heat down is counterintuitive since hot air rises. However, I don't want it sucking in a bunch of dust from the floor, which is going to be in higher concentration lower to the ground, especially since it gets kicked up from the carpet. It would also allow the radiator to pull cool air in rather than pre-warmed air from inside the case. This plan seemed really good in my head. I felt like I was going to easily get all the fans to fit in place. I had checked with PC Parts Picker before I had ordered any parts, and it had assured me everything I had planned would work. I think I might have missed one fine detail which derailed the whole process. You see, this case can fit a micro ATX as well as an ATX. I'm gonna be honest, after building in it, this case is solidly meant for micro ATX. Just because you can fit an ATX size board doesn't mean you should. Since the micro ATX boards are shorter, you get full access to the bottom of the case. 140mm fans will fit just fine without the bulk of the motherboard being in the way. Since you can't get the fans far enough back, you can't get them to line up with the only hole patterns that will work. I tried to see if I could replace the 140mm fans with 120mm fans, but they wouldn't fit either. Thus, all fans on the bottom meant to be exhaust were a bust. Okay, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the one that really makes you scratch your head and go, huh. Where do you think the power supply is? That chunky boy had to go somewhere. That's right, it's in the front of the case. They want you to place the power supply at the top of the front of the case. This allows for the hot air that the power supply makes to get exited out of the case. However, Cooler Master must have not been thinking as they put this layout together. Since there is a gap between the back of the power supply and the top of the case, there was a pocket of hot air that kind of built up there. You need this room for the power cable extension to plug into the back of the power supply. While the top of the case does have holes, by the time you cover it with the dust filter, you have a barrier stopping the hot air from just easily escaping. You see, the fan pressure exiting from the power supply is just really not enough to overcome the resistance to allow it to vent very well. This would then get sucked over by the exhaust fan by the back of the case, pulling the hot air over the CPU from the power supply. When I switched to AIO water cooling, it was found through my Googling, YouTubing, and from the installation instructions that came with the cooler that it's the best practice to put the pump below the radiator. There are many benefits for this layout. It makes sure the pump is always full of coolant, which is its lubricant, and keeps any extra air trapped at the top of the loop in the radiator. Both of these are important in having a long life for your pump. This meant that the power supply needed to move, which is what I did. I moved it to the bottom of the case. This now means that the hot air from the power supply gets sucked up by the radiator at the top, meaning we are adding the heat from it to the CPU loop again. At this point, you start to see the restrictions I have been up against. I really feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. As I'm looking at this case, I feel claustrophobic. I wanted it because it was little. However, if I was going to build correctly in this case, I should have gotten a micro ATX. I just didn't want that motherboard size. There are many reasons why, but that's for a later video. I figured out I could add one 120mm fan into the front just as I had hoped I could. At this point, I had gotten the computer into this layout. 2 intake fans and 2 exhausting. Front intake fan filtered, back intake not filtered. This is not really ideal, as you can see the dust quickly piles up. This will quickly clog the radiator, making it not pass as much air through. Either way, clouded by the frustration from the bottom fans, I didn't think about everything. Short term, I'm going to change to this fan orientation. Having it pull from the top will mean all the intake is filtered. Long term, I would like to get into a different case. Do you have a case you think has good airflow and has a smart build layout? Comment below! Also, if you like the video and subscribe, that would make my heart flutter like a butterfly. Now, before I got to any of this, I did start off by seeing if I could in fact cut metal. So I got out the rotary tool, took to an old side panel. I cut at the grate part, which would be more like what I was attempting. I also cut at the solid metal just to see if I could. I wore a dust mask while I cut to keep as many of the fumes away from my lungs as I could. Honestly, at least now I know I have this ability and a tool with which to accomplish it. So, this ended in a learning exercise. Did I fail? Maybe. However, I gained confidence in being able to use my new rotary tool, so I'm going to count that a success. Also, it got me up and moving. I got to clean out the inside of the case, but it also allowed me to see how I'd like to go moving forward. Gaining knowledge is winning. Well, it's been a ride. See you next time, buddies.